Hi, I'm Gary Wright and I'm here at Payments International having a chat with Chris Skinner. And Chris, welcome to the event. I've had an interesting day. I've heard many things that reassure me that the industry is moving forward. I'm also frustrated that at the pace of which it moves forward is not as quick as it should be. For example, today we've heard of Facebook's announcement of friend-to-friend payments. And there was a good question around how the regulators are going to deal with this advancement with remittances and new entrants into the industry, recognizing that they need some form of regulation. And quite frankly, the answer from the regulators was, we're not quite sure yet. We've got other things to do. What's your perception of that issue with the regulators looking at the innovation in payments?
Well, the regulators are always behind the eight ball. They're always in catch-up mode. They're always looking at what's gone wrong in the past and trying to fix it, rather than looking at what's going to be happening in the future and trying to put a framework around those innovations. And so Facebook payments and Apple Pay are examples of things that are moving very quickly. But in the fintech space overall, things are moving at a turbocharged pace. I mean, $12.7 billion has been invested in the last 5 years in 1,000 fintech startups, some of which are emerging to be major players like TransferWise. And the banks are saying to me, well, TransferWise doesn't have the overheads of compliance and regulation and the cost of that we have. And that's because the regulators haven't got round to it yet, because they're still trying to fix the broken system. And I think the real thing that's interesting right now is I talk a lot about the value web, because it's a phrase coined around cryptocurrencies, but it's much wider than cryptocurrencies. Facebook being a good example, and that if you have lots of friends on Facebook, lots of people who like and favourite and share your news and views, then you have huge influence and people want to buy that influence. So you can monetize a lot of what's now in the internet just by ideas, creativity, entertainment and fun. And that changes the game, because now we're saying the generation of the internet that's there today is a global community that can create value out of just posting stuff. And then they can monetize that value because it becomes influence. And that's something that the regulator really does have to wake up to, because that's global, cross-border, and they're not even thinking about it.
And do you see any advancement where one, say, group of regulators will take the lead of that and influence the others, or is that something that's just going to grow slowly over the coming months?
Well, UK, London specifically, is trying to be the fintech capital of the world. So as we see this hybrid integration of the traditional old banking system with the new innovative technology system, we're seeing a regulatory framework that has to come together. And because London is a principles-based regulatory structure, even now, after the crisis and sovereign debt crisis and all the issues that we've seen in the traditional system, it is becoming a focal point for innovation, because Boris Johnson, David Cameron wants it to be that. And a great example is I was talking to a company called CoinJar, which is an Australian company, and they just won Best in Show at Finovate, which is an innovation fintech show. And I asked the chief executive, because he said to me, we've just moved the company from Australia to London, to the UK. I said, well, why did you do that? He said, because it's so much easier working with the regulators here.
Right.
And that, I think, underscores what's happening, which is that you have traditional tight regulation that's almost Napoleonic in some parts of the world, particularly in Brussels, whilst you have much looser regulation, even with the issues we faced here in the UK, because we believe it has to be free markets with principles-based regulation to encourage progress and innovation rather than discourage.
Yes. Okay, I'm conscious of the time here, and I want to get another question in here, which is a bit of an old chestnut. There's a very traditional way in which the banks and the financial institutions look at data management. It's locked in silos, it's from disparate systems, and when they try and get it together, it's a combination of Excel spreadsheets and different views. Now, if we really look at artificial intelligence, machine learning, reasoning, and so on, the technologies surrounding that, you can now access that data and manipulate that data in a more powerful way than you ever could before. And I'm part of a group that's looking at that. But one of the frustrations again today was the lack of understanding of the true value of data and unlocking it. And do you see anything from your side, particularly looking at the challenger banks and the new startups, where they're taking a fresh and different approach to that problem?
Yeah, you used a critical word there, which is unlock. And the issue is that most data is locked into old heritage systems that are built in the 1970s and 80s, and banks don't know how to break out of them. And what they really have to do is to look at a cleansed data architecture. It's really difficult to do because most banks have their data not just locked into heritage systems, but equally into product silos. Yes. And so the owners of the data aren't willing to release that information to the enterprise because it's their proprietary information, they think, even though it's actually not. It's the bank's information, so it should be unlocked. So to get a data cleansed architecture, everyone tells me is impossible, but I've seen it done. I mean, Commonwealth Bank of Australia did a very good job of moving to infrastructure as a service, right, moving to data cleansing so that they could harmonise the information and leverage it across the organisation. And Michael Hart, who led that project, is now the CIO and head of operations at Barclays Global, so no doubt Barclays will be moving, yes, to a similar approach. Yes. So it can be done.
It is reassuring that some banks are actually thinking about the bites and the opportunity to use advanced technology to look at their client base much differently. One final observation, because you raised it before about London being the fintech capital. One of the observations I make today is when some of the seniors talked about advancement in technology, they looked at things they've seen in Silicon Valley. I'm not sure that the profile, the focus that some banks are putting on to fintech in London, where they create labs, incubators, accelerators, I think there's a huge disconnect between the idea of doing that inside a large organisation and its practical value when it comes into the business of product and operations and so on. Okay, I don't know if you've seen any thoughts on that one, but I think that's a huge gap where they're paying no more than a lip service, really, I think, to the issue.
I mean, one of the most popular entries made on my blog in the last year is probably the one that said the best job in banking is chief cannibal officer. And the idea of that is that you should eat the organisation and destroy the organisation using innovation capabilities. And then once you worked out how to destroy the organisation, obviously that should be put through to the board and incorporated. And I think a key point here is that people think Silicon Valley is where the action is, and it is in technology terms. But here in the UK, and specifically in London, we're employing 44,000 people in fintech startups, yes, and developments, which is more than Silicon Valley and Wall Street combined. And bear in mind that Silicon Valley and Wall Street are separated by 2,500 miles. We've got it all sitting next door here. And so that is the key point that Boris Johnson and UK Gov is trying to put forward. In fact, they just released a paper today around a vision of fintech through 2025, which was a collaborative project between UK government, the financial community, and the innovators, including yours truly. So this is the key space to watch.
I think you're absolutely right. Anyway, thank you very much for your time today, and thank you.